Good afternoon. Bonjour. Delighted to be here with all of you, both on site and online. It's a real pleasure to be here with partners from the Ministry of Education, the EEF, UNESCO, and so many of you across the room and across the globe. It's been quite an exciting 2 days and a very engaging conference, and it has indeed capped several months of planning. So I want to start by saying thank you and congratulations to the EEF and the Ministry of Education and all the partners for being able to pull such a remarkable conference together, and for, I think, really going much beyond our wildest dreams in terms of the reach and how many people are connected with us and connecting together online to this conference. I found it so inspiring to see the change makers coming in from Helsinki, the Philippines, from China to New York to Bangkok, and I understand we are having colleagues and partners connecting from all over the globe to really look at, engage around new and creative ways to drive and sustain equitable change. Let me share a few of the takeaways that we would take from these 2 days and maybe some thoughts for the future. When we look at the various sessions of the conference and what the conference covered, it really tells a powerful story of the potential for change against a range of topics and challenges that have been discussed, including the importance of the legal and legislative frameworks to support equity in education, the use and the importance of the use of data to identify learning needs of disadvantaged groups, the need to ensuring access to qualified and empowered teachers, the necessity of systematically budgeting, planning, and monitoring equity. And to us, all of this comes into really a realization that all the good practices and lessons that we've heard tell us one message, is that inequalities in education are not inevitable. These inequalities are the results of policy choices that we have made, as governments, as a community of education, as societies, as community actors. And what it means to us is that these choices can be adjusted. We can alter the course of these policy decisions that we make together. We can learn. We can make them better. How do we do that? We do that by fostering an inclusive, action-oriented dialogue, such as this conference. We do that by becoming laser-focused around children that are not accessing schools, but even more importantly, around what do these children that access school learn? What are their learning outcomes? What do they walk away with as skills, as knowledge, as capacity to engage in their own future and the future of their families and their communities? We do that by changing our operating models, which are currently not delivering change at the pace that we need to meet this very ambitious challenge of the SDG 4 around education. We do that as education champions by embodying the urgency of change. And I want to really emphasize this, the urgency of change for the education systems and for ourselves. We need to acknowledge that we do not have all the answers. We need to become more proactive at seeking these answers and creating these communities, these networks that maybe tell us that some of the answers have already been co-created somewhere else. So we need to be better at the knowledge management, at seeking and then operationalizing. We also need to open ourselves to wider and perhaps more novel types of partnerships to get these education outcomes that we need with academia, civil society partners, young people, and private sector partners. We need to fully embrace and indeed to champion new narratives that seek to disrupt ourselves to start with, but also the education system that we all want to support. Narratives, I believe, that should revolve around the notion of the requirement for transformational change, for systemic change in our education model. When we listen to young people, when we look at the pace of change, What we need is not changes at the margin of what we do. We need transformational at the heart of the system that we want to champion in order to create that education system that genuinely works for all, an education for all. Now, there's no doubt that the COVID pandemic is a global tragedy, and its impact has hurt us all, and unfortunately, as Kunjoya said, it has and potentially will impact disproportionately those that are already most vulnerable, those that were already struggling, those that were already behind in their learning journeys. Yet, it also put an emphasis on a further inequalizer or further engagement area for us, and that is the notion of the digital divide, which is reflected in both the differences in access to hardware, connectivity and the right software, but also the huge shortfall of teachers and parents with the digital skills to maintain continuity of learning. COVID is going to impact the world, it's going to impact the societies, the economy, it's going to have significant negative impact, potentially long-term impact on job access and the type of employment that is available to young people to access. What it tells me, what it tells UNICEF, is that the need to invest in this generation's human capital has never been greater. If there was ever a once-in-a-generation opportunity to co-create for system change and for collective impact through education, it is right now. Going forward from a UNICEF perspective, we really want to put our effort around the notion of learning unlimited. And that is to support every child and every young person to access learning anywhere by connecting schools, connecting every child, connecting every young person to the internet as an opportunity to fast track and to systematize their access to learning, and also scaling up world-class digital solutions which meet every child and every young person's unique learning needs and context. Many of the young people we talk to tell us education has not changed for 100 years. I think all of us would argue that's not completely true. Still, that's a perception that the education systems give to many of young people in the world. This is not just a Thailand-focused dialogue. It's the same classroom, it's the same way of teaching, it's the same kind of test at the end of the year. Many of these things are here. And yet, machine learning is here with us. Digital platforms have been creating. Some startups creating by 20-year-old are getting learning outcomes that are better in focused engagement than general learning systems at national level. Let us learn from this. Let us take this opportunity of that digital opportunity to actually fast track this learning for all, to equalize access to education for all. It will not be easy, and it will require, again, a change in how we work together, in how we connect to young people, in how we take their ideas, in how we better understand what works for them. And it can't be all digital. I myself have young children, and we've gone through COVID together, and they actually went through distance learning. And we quickly realized that whilst we are clearly part of a community that is very, very gifted in terms of our connection to internet, great schools, teachers mostly ready for this, it was very visible to me as a parent that that was simply not enough for either of my children, that they needed that connection, that physical engagement, that connection with the teachers to engage around emotional intelligence, around collaborative work, around connecting with others in a way that is not just purely academic. So there's a number of challenges and areas for engagement, and I would maybe offer 5 areas that maybe could allow us to take the most of this digital engagement. The first one is we need to deliver clear roadmaps to connect all schools, including very remote ones, to internet, so that their students may have a chance to benefit from local and from global learning opportunities that is available to them, or that we will make available to them. This needs to happen tomorrow. There is no excuse for us not to connect schools. We have the resources, we have the knowledge, we have the know-how. we can do this if we come together. And together as a global community, also bringing in partners such as private sector partners and making them co-owners of this challenge, not just contributor, but co-owners of the success, of the result. 2, we need to embrace the understanding that education is about academic learnings and learning outcomes, but also so much more. It's about fostering student ownership of their education, their voice, their empowerment, their organizational skills, their growth mindset, their mental health, their nutritional status, their social emotional skills. All of these are part of the adults that they will be tomorrow. All of these are assets that they will need to manage the challenges of tomorrow that I think everybody agrees are somewhat greater than our own generation. 3, we need to maximize the technology's potential to transform education. And that will require massive investment in our teachers. We have an incredible potential to make technology work for children, but also to work for teachers. It's not and will never replace teachers, but it can be an incredibly powerful tool for teachers to be better at their work, for teachers to focus on where their best added value lies, around that social connection, around that emotional intelligence, around that critical skills, around that analytical spirit. And many of the teachers of the world are not quite ready to take on that challenge. They're not quite ready to benefit from the digital skills. Let us invest in that in a way that we have not yet done before. 4, if we acknowledge that education also happens at home, we need to acknowledge that many of these homes in the world are not yet connected. They don't have a device. They don't have electricity sometimes. They don't have necessarily parents who are there at home, who are either educated enough to accompany their child's learning journey, or simply are not home because they're working long hours. How do we manage this? How do we make sure that we have different models of engagement for these children, and that we make sure that technology is an accelerator, but not an accelerator of the divide? It's an accelerator of the bridging of that divide. How do we connect these children? Last point, financing of education systems and budgets must be a core priority of a country's economic recovery plan. It cannot come second base or third base. It cannot be an afterthought. What we invest in today's children will define the success of a nation's economic recovery in very short term and mid-term. We need to make that the priority of the investment portfolio of the government. We firmly believe that how we leverage technology in education today has a potential to transform how the systems of education will be equitable in the future. In summary, we, as a world community, we are faced with an unprecedented challenge, which is the COVID crisis. And yet I strongly believe that this challenge is, on the one hand, jeopardizing some success that we have been building for the last decade or the last couple of decades. But it also presents an opportunity, as never before, to make it so stark, the potential and the requirement, the necessity, the urgency to invest in new education systems, to prepare our young people to be tomorrow ready and to take on the challenges that tomorrow will offer. We want to look at it as an opportunity of a lifetime for us as education champions to drive this transformational change that the education systems in the world require us to drive, to bring that equitable systems of education and quality education for all. Let us be the change makers that the children need. Let us be the change makers that the world needs today. Thank you.